hope that you are doing well and hanging in there this week. I wanted to take just a moment and share with you a few thoughts that have been on my mind as we have been moving through these last few weeks, as we've been adjusting to new norms and new rhythms and just a new way of doing life. And truth be told, I actually wasn't planning on doing this video tonight. It's about 9:30 at night. I'm here in my sweatpants. I actually was planning to shoot this video yesterday and tried to, but had some difficulty with the microphone that I usually use. And so I'm doing this without a microphone, and it's just been one of those weeks where it's like things are not going the way I thought they would. Life right now isn't going the way that I thought it would. And I think for many people, that's where we're living right now in this season of life. And so I wanted to share with you 4 phrases that have been turning over in my mind over the last couple weeks as we have been moving into this very disruptive season. And I'm going to do this in 2 videos. And so tonight I'm going to share just 2 of those phrases with you. And the 4 phrases actually come from a book called Canoeing the Mountains. A good friend of mine recommended this book to me a couple years ago. And the premise of the book is that it uses the exploration of Lewis and Clark as an example to talk about leadership in uncharted territory. And right now, for many of us, we are in uncharted territory. For some of us, it's uncharted because maybe we're have lost our jobs, or we are worried about losing our jobs. For many of us, our kids are at home and we're trying to homeschool them and to figure out what to do with our day because we have our kids around all the time now, and all of a sudden we're teaching them. And then we're just cooped up in our house and we can't go anywhere. And so in this book, he talks about as you enter into uncharted territory, there's 4 things you have to do. And the reason he uses Lewis and Clark as an example is because their mission was to find a waterway, some sort of water passageway to the West Coast. But what they didn't anticipate as they're exploring America as it's a new land, is they didn't anticipate the Rocky Mountains, and that they wouldn't be simply boating through the mountains. And so they had to carry their canoes over the mountains. They were not prepared for the terrain that they were facing. But in those moments when we are facing unexpected circumstances, there's 4 things that we can do to keep us grounded and help us continue forward. In the first one in this book, he talks about start with conviction. If we start with conviction, we have a greater chance of getting through the unexpected season or getting through the difficulty. And as folks who are followers of Jesus Christ, our conviction is in what we call the sovereignty of God. That somehow God is bigger than our circumstances. He is over all things. And in some ways, he knows exactly what's going on in our life. And so therefore, we don't have to be afraid. And there's a few passages in the New Testament that speak to this reality. And one is Colossians chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. It says, "From him, being Jesus, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him." Essentially, Jesus is the supreme being in all of the universe. And then it goes on to say, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Even in the midst of our crazy lives, Jesus is in the midst of it, holding it all together. And there's a very similar phrase in Hebrews. It says in Hebrews 1, verse 3, that the sun is the radiance of God's glory. The sun not being the sun in the sky, but the sun being Jesus, is the radiance of God's glory. He is the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. So Jesus is before all things. In him, all things hold together. So therefore, when we face unexpected circumstances, we can trust that while they might be unexpected to us, they're not unexpected to God. He knows exactly where we are, where we're going, how this whole thing is going to turn out. So therefore, in the midst of the craziness, we can rest in him. So we start with conviction that Jesus is before all things and he will see us through. The second phrase, if the first phrase is start with conviction, the second phrase is to stay connected. See, in times of crisis, it's easy to isolate ourselves. We don't want to be a burden. We're afraid to let people know that we have issues or problems or challenges. But in this season, we have to be isolated. We are mandated to be isolated. And the second thing that I think is important to remember is that in unexpected circumstances, we have to stay connected. Specifically, we have to stay connected to God, and we have to stay connected to one another. There's all of these verses in the New Testament that are known as the one another verses. They are verses that talk about how we are supposed to engage with one another as followers of Jesus. It says that we have to encourage one another and speak to one another in love and truth. We have to come around one another and care for each other and be with one another. There's all of these one another passages. And there's one in Galatians that's real simple. It's Galatians 6, verse 2. And it simply says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." But part of the call to follow Jesus is to carry the burdens of one another. And it's really important that we stay connected to one another in really challenging times. And that's difficult in this season because we can't actually physically be together. But we do have ways to connect virtually, through prayer, through FaceTime, through Zoom. And so as we move through this season, not knowing how long we're going to be in this place, it's important that we start with conviction, reminding ourselves that God is bigger, that He is stronger, that He will see us through. And two, that we are called to stay connected to God, stay connected to His scriptures, and stay connected to one another. And if we do these things, we have a better chance of making it through this crisis with our head held high, our feet on the ground, knowing that we can face what comes tomorrow. So those are the first two of the 4 phrases, and next week I'm going to come back and share the other 2 with you. So hopefully those are helpful. Hopefully they're encouraging. They give you a little bearing on what you can be doing in this time to persevere and make it to the end. Start with conviction and stay connected. Hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you again real soon. Grace and peace to you.